Welcome to the Black Sparrow Media Internet Broadcast Network.
You are listening to Linux in the Ham Shack. LHS is a podcast about Linux, open source, and amateur radio for everyone. Now here are your hosts, Russ, K52UX, Cheryl, W5MOO, and Bill, NE4RD.
Well, hello everybody and welcome. You have tuned in to episode number 451 of Linux in the Ham Shack, the most terrific amateur radio podcast on the internet. And you have tuned in for a deep dive episode. And this one's going to be, I don't know, a little bit different, I guess. It's going to be sort of a live topic discussion about programming and VSCode and debugging. And Bill is probably going to show me all of the bad Python I've done over the past week or so. And then who knows where we'll go after that. But it's basically just going to be a conversation between me and Bill about stuff, and hopefully by the end of it, it'll be somewhat entertaining and somewhat informative. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. I'm Russ, K5TUX. Cheryl is on assignment.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD.
Okay, so here we are, and the whole this all started because of a project I talked about on the last show, or the last two shows, whatever it was, about Mike K6GTE having written a curses-based winter field day logger in Python. And then there was some discussion revolving around that. And then I was like, well, I haven't done any Python code in a while. Let me take a look at this. And then it evolved into me figuring out how to do code forks inside GitHub and pull requests and all kinds of things like that. And then me trying to flex my long unused Python muscles. And so now we have literally just ended Winter Field Day. I was using the code that Mike wrote and that I updated. There was a grand total ultimately of 9 pull requests. Mike probably doesn't know that there's one waiting for him right now. And I know he's listening. He's in the chat. So, but literally yesterday when I was doing some logging, there were some bugs that cropped up. Plus I made one change that we can discuss. But I was just editing it in a Vim, a text editor, and not dealing with VSCode, which Bill says that he loaded my code into VSCode with the Pylint library attached to it. And it says there's like 99 errors in my code, or 99 insufficiencies, I guess we'll call them, in my Python code, which is not surprising since I really haven't done anything with Python in a really long time, but it felt good to flex those muscles. So we're going to talk about it. But the first thing I have to do is actually be able to see VS Code. So I'm actually going to go to my Windows machine, icky, which is running WSL, which for those who may not know what that is, it's the Windows subsystem for Linux. So I'm actually running Ubuntu under my Windows. And Bill says there's some magic that if I just type code, well, I have to clone the repo though first. So let me get to that. Oh, and I'm going to get audio off my my remote desktop. So when you hear the stupid Windows noise, that's exactly what's happening. So let me find a place to clone this. Let's see. Let's go into opt, and I'll make a directory called what I usually do. Oh, I can't do that. Okay, hang on. It's going to be fun. Okay, so I go
now.
Into
mind
opt.
you, these problems are just not problems. I mean, they're informational debug information items that are like, use capital letters when using constants, and use use camel case and stuff like that. So these are like some of the nitpicky things for each of the I'm sure everybody's heard of PEP 8 and stuff like that. And with Python, if you've ever messed with it, where it's like, don't make the lines too long. You actually have to, kind of split your lines up so that, so they don't take too long and everything else. So like these are the enforcement items that kind of come across when you run Pylint, or this extension is called Pylance. Put it out by Microsoft. It's an extension for VS Code, so you can kind of see all that stuff built in, and you get IntelliSense and a bunch of other stuff as you type directly in it. And so again, these are warning and informational problems. These are not, my code's crashing problem, but yeah, it kind of gives you. I'm going to
blame Mike for most of the not camel case type stuff. That's stuff that I did. I put it in that way, and a lot of the early code that I was basing my code off of, which is Mike's, doesn't use camel case. So
nobody cares about that stuff, really. I mean,
I kind of like it just because it looks better to me, and I understand that it's sort of. I think that started when PHP actually flipped over from its procedural styling to object oriented. That sort of became really popular, using that, like the first part of a variable name is lowercase, but then the rest of it is camel cased or whatever maybe that's a Java syntax. Maybe that's where that came out of.
Yeah.
Or Java styling, not syntax. But I don't know. I just kind of got used to doing stuff that way, especially for class names. And, I don't know. And I was if you program in a certain language, sorry. No, yeah.
I know I'm delayed now. I'm already delayed.
You're already delayed. Well, undelay yourself. Undelay. I get to wait. So anyway, what I've done while we've been sitting here bantering is I've cloned my repo.
Okay.
And now I've lost my window.
You have installed VS Code though, right?
I have installed VS Code, yes. And so Windows. Now I've got my clone of the repo, and in Windows, yes.
Yeah.
And now I have to. Oh, I cloned this as the wrong user, didn't I? Yeah, of course I did. Oh, for crying out.
That's the wrong user.
I want to do this all as me, not as root.
Well, you shouldn't be a root anyways in WSL. It should be just you. How did you install WSL? Do we need to start over?
The way it said to do it.
I mean, I've never been root on my my WSL thing, so I have no idea how you could get there.
I sued to root.
Oh, okay. USU dash or sudo bash. Okay,
exactly.
You broke all the rules.
I did not break any rules. All right, let's see. GitHub.com. /J.R. Woodman, /WFD _pi _logger. Okay, cloned.
All right, so go into that directory.
Well, actually, it hasn't finished cloning yet. Why are you so slow? Okay,
so much code.
It's not that much code. It's one friggin' script. Okay,
it's history. A lot of history in there. So
yeah. Okay. So I need to go I just need to go code dot, right?
Go into the directory first.
I'm in the directory. Yes.
Okay. Then type in code space dot and then press enter.
Oh, look, it's magic. It came up.
So what's actually happened? Did you see it installing code server and stuff like that?
I don't know what I saw. Actually, because as soon as I did it, it stopped doing stuff. So hang on a second. Where did that go? Did that close? Okay, let me type code dot again.
Yeah, you can run it in Linux as well. Yes, that's obvious. But this is really a cool way to do stuff if you're going to do programming on a Windows computer. I found at least it's much easier to maintain your environments and stuff like that inside of the Ubuntu instance or whatever, flavor of WSL image you want to have on the computer. Inside of that and the WSL integration with the desktop, the Windows desktop running VS Code is amazing. It runs just tight and no problems. And in fact, it runs just as good as it would if it was running files locally, except for you can actually target there's ways you can target the Windows environment too, but anyway, I digress.
I started it up with a code dot. I am looking at my directory in VS Code.
Yep. So I pulled it up so you can see that inside of your Explorer, you have your entire directory is in there, and it might have asked you if you wanted to trust the parent directory and stuff like that.
Yes, which I did.
Which is generally built in VS Code protection. Do you want to, have everything in your projects directory, available so it doesn't ask you this every time you git clone something and then VS Code open it. So this is great. So it probably already detected if you clicked on your wfd_curses.py file that it's a Python file.
And it wants
may
me
have
to
already
install. So
it may have already suggested some stuff to you. So go ahead and install the extension, and it's probably going to recommend that you install Python and Pylance, and these are the two things that will get installed inside of your instance. Now, the nice thing is if you have it installed in your Windows instance, when it comes up in WSL, it'll tell you that, hey, you do have this installed over here. I can also install it for your WSL instance. So you can have it installed in both places. And if it doesn't need a certain thing, like I don't run Jupyter pretty much ever. Jupyter is a Python notebook, so you can do some interactive programming and computation right in the command line. I just don't use it for my stuff that I do, and it's definitely disabled. It is enabled for Windows, but I haven't used it in WSL at all. So, you don't need that.
I'm installing Python 3.9 from the Microsoft Store.
Oh, you don't need to do that. You shouldn't have to do that.
It asked me to do that.
Yeah, you shouldn't need to do that.
In VS Code, it says install Python. Python extension requires Python to be installed. Install Python from the Microsoft Store.
Oh, yeah, you didn't need to do that. You should
Well, I
have been
haven't
able to
done it yet.
select your interpreter.
Okay. Select a Python interpreter.
Yeah, and you should see one on your path as long as you have Python installed in your WSL.
I don't know that Python's installed in WSL, so let me find out. That could be the problem. Let's see. Dpackage Python. Python's installed.
Is it just when you type in Python, do you get anything? Because you might have to do the Python 3 as Python package.
Sudo apt install Python is Python is Python 3. There we go.
Okay. Go ahead and just kill WS or
code
your VS Code and just restart it.
Okay.
Relaunch it from WSL. I just find that's easier. You can tell it to refresh itself, but it's just easier to close it.
I'm going to do a quick update on my WSL because there are some Python libraries that need to be updated.
Oh, yeah, most likely. Might as well install pip too, and you'll go ahead and install if you want to. You can install at this point. Once you have pip going, you can actually do pip install Pylent. So you can have that on the command line as well. So you can compare the two debuggers or code reviewers, I guess you'd call it.
So do you want to talk about what pip and Pylent are?
Okay, yeah. So for Python, you have, Python is the Python interpreter. So if you wanted to go in and just program in Python in the command line, you just type in Python or Python 3 and press enter, and you'd be presented with an interactive Python shell where you could program in Python. Pip is the package installer, and I'm going to look at the exact what that is called, Python. Because I don't know what it stands for. I'm sure it stands for something important. I've been programming Python for so long, but I just don't remember. Pip. What is pip? A package installer. Pip is the package installer for Python, so that's where it gets package installer for Python. Pip. And pip it allows you to install pretty much every module, including modules you shouldn't install because you need to code review every module you install. Not for home use, but for enterprise use, you should definitely code review every module you install. This is how you end up with the NPM module and everything else that takes down the interwebs. But anyway, so pip is a package manager. Pylent is a package as well in the Python package library, whatever you want to call it. And Pylent, what it does is a linter. So it takes a look at a specific piece of code and it'll give you things that don't conform to the specifications of the code. Almost every language has some kind of linting application. ESLint, TSLint. I mean, there's a ton of them. So pretty much every language I've ever worked with has a linter. I think even PHP has a linter now. Probably has had one for probably since like version 5 or something like that. Most people don't use the linters because they're just annoying and they tell you all the stupid things like like your code's not capitalized. You don't need to have parentheses around this if statement. Stuff like that. Just conformities, pure conformities to the language. Again, it's nice to have that stuff when you put stuff out, to go ahead and review it through that, just to kind of do just a code cleanup or a little refactoring of stuff that makes it easy for people to kind of look at the code later on. It's just a little house cleaning, kind of like the last thing you do before you kind of say, okay, here's everything. Or you just have people that are interested in fixing those kind of things involved in your project, and you sick them on the linting issues. Anything that's not a true debug issue, it's informational or just a warning type thing. Early warning systems of like deprecations and stuff like that too could be listed in there.
Okay, I can't install Python.
You can't install Python.
No. I'm sorry. I can't install Python inside VS Code. It says select Python interpreter. So I click on the thing for select Python interpreter.
Now, you didn't have VS Code open before you did all this, did you?
No. Let me close,
because it does say
WSL too.
on. Yeah, just
I
just want
all
to make
that stuff.
sure.
Okay, so I'm going to start. Oh, stop it. Windows, I hate you. I'm going to start WSL again. I'm going to go to my repo.
K2.
And I'm going to do code period. Okay, and it says select Python interpreter. So I click on select Python interpreter, and it gives me nothing, no options.
So let's just verify on the bottom left. What does it say on the taskbar or on your bottom bar of your VS Code? Does it say WSL Ubuntu?
It doesn't say. Okay, well, let me hang on. Let me close this.
Are you inside of the WSL bash? You're not in a PowerShell prompt, are you?
No, I was in WSL.
Like in Ubuntu.
In Ubuntu, yes. Okay. So my down here at the bottom, it says master.
Okay, so it's picking up the GitHub, but the very first thing on the left should say WSL Ubuntu. So it knows that it's running in Ubuntu.
It does not say that.
Oh, well, that's going to be problematic. That's why I can't find the interpreter. It's running oddly. You didn't install VS Code inside of Ubuntu, right? It just did something. Let's just do a depackage here.
I installed VS Code in Windows.
Just in Windows.
Just in Windows, yes.
Let me just make sure. VS.
Yeah, it says code is in my Windows directory. Programs, Microsoft VS Code, bin code. That's what it's running.
I literally have never had this problem before. Let's say VS Code WSL. Let's just make sure we have to do everything right. So you've installed VS Code. Blah, blah, blah. You've updated your WSL. So when you did code dot the very first time, did you see it say updating VS Code server at all?
I don't know. Let me do just code without the directory and see what it gives me. Okay, so if I just type code, okay, it brings me back into what I was in before.
And it doesn't say WSL. That is so interesting. All right, so bring up the command palette by Control-Shift-P inside of VS Code.
Control-Shift-P. Okay.
So it should have like a little search kind of thing at the very top. And then type in remote.
Remote.
And then you should see options for WSL or Remote Explorer. Focus on WSL targets view.
Nope.
No, you do not see that.
I do not see that.
Hey. Okay, so let's install the WSL extension because I didn't think I have that on mine. WSL, I might. Let me look here real quick. WSL. You know what? I do have mine. It is installed. All right, so go back out. Sorry. Okay. I might have messed you all up, even though I thought it did this automatically. I've had this done so many times. Okay, so just bring up VS Code inside of Windows.
Okay, bring up VS Code inside of Windows. So VS
Doesn't matter. Code. Just open it up. And then on the left, go to extensions.
Left, go to extension. Let's run and debug extensions. Okay.
Yep. And then at the very top where it has a little search bar for it, type in WSL. and install a package called remote-wsl.
Okay. Installing. It's installed.
Okay, so go ahead and close it.
Close it.
Now open it from your command line inside of WSL. Let's see if this fixes it magically. And after this, we're installing Emacs. I just want you all to know because like we're one step away from Emacs.
We are not doing that. Okay, installing VSCode server for x64.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so we're winner chicken dinner now. So, sorry. No,
You're
problem.
terrible.
Yeah, I swear I didn't have to install that before, but maybe I did, and I just didn't remember.
Okay, trust authors. Yes. Okay, now it says WSL Ubuntu down in the lower left.
We're winning. All right, so you go ahead and click your file again, and again, it's probably going to ask you to install the Python stuff. But this time, it won't actually ask you where the Python interpreter is because it'll say, oh, look, you have
No,
Python.
it didn't ask me for anything, so it just opened the file.
Oh, it's sweet. Okay, so, and it has Python down, should probably be 3.8.10, 64-bit.
Where do I see?
Next to your master, there's like a little sync button, and then Python.
It doesn't show that. I see Python over here on the lower right.
Right, but on the left, do you have a select interpreter?
Do I have a select interpreter? No. No, I do not.
Okay, so go over to the extensions real quick.
Okay.
See, we are installing Emacs. So yeah, just type in Python there, and just click the Python, and it might say that it's not installed for WSL, or it'll give you a prompt for install for WSL.
Okay, wait a minute. So, that's okay. Extensions, and then do what? Python. Okay, install in WSL.
Yes,
it says installing. Da 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 da. It's actually doing something. There's like indications that something is happening. So, although nothing is happening.
It's a little bit of magic that happens.
Okay, it's installed. Now I see Python 3.8.10 64-bit.
Yep, okay. So let's just make sure PyLance installed as well. So you should just backspace over Thon and put in Lance. Just make sure that's installed as well.
It looks like it is. Let's see. Yes.
Yeah, the option should be like disable or uninstall if it's
right.
installed.
Yeah, it's installed. Okay.
All right, sweet. So now your file, if you go back to your WFT.
I'm now back in my file. Okay.
And if you just Control S to save the file, it should kick off the PyLance, which should fill out your problems tab. When you might have to click the view and then problems, just so you can see the bottom bar stuff pop up.
I do have like a warning.
You do have a warning.
Let's see. Import BS4 could not be resolved from the source. Oh, because I probably don't have that package in WSL. So
yeah. Okay. So now we're getting to the meat of it. So yes. So a couple of things to begin with. So now that we got our VS Code and everything else, someone installing this needs to know exactly what they need to install in order to get working. BS4 is one item, and the other thing is LXML in order to do the XML processing for Beautiful Soup.
For Beautiful Soup, right?
Yeah, it doesn't automatically install the XML parser, which I found out when I first went into to debug why HamQTH wasn't loading for me. Because it wasn't throwing an error back. It just was not running. So a big thing when you're building programs and stuff like that, and you're including libraries that are not in the standard set of modules and libraries that Python comes with, it's generally helpful to include a requirements.txt file. It's just a text file that has packages, and it could be a pinned package where you have, like in our case here, BS4 is one. So on one line, you'd have BS4, and then a carriage return, and then you would have LXML for the XML library that's also needed, and a carriage return. You can pin package versions inside of that requirements.txt file with an equals, and then the version number and stuff like that. And if you click to that terminal there,
what
terminal? See your terminal tab down there with the problems, output, debug console. Do you see that?
I see.
Inside of VS Code.
Yes, I do see it. Okay. Yep. I got it.
So that is your Linux terminal. So it works just like you're in Linux.
Okay.
So let's just go ahead and do a pip space install, and then go and do your BS4 and space, and you can do LXML. So that'll get those two things in there.
LXML was already installed. I installed it by package instead of pip.
Oh, okay. You installed the Python 3-LXML
And Python 3-BS4.
Oh, okay. So they're installed now? Is that what
They
you said?
are, yes.
Okay. So if you type in pip and then freeze in this directory, you'll see an output of like pretty much everything. Of course, ones you don't even need in there, but basically it gives your entire environment that these are actually running in, that your application is running in. Since we didn't set up a virtual environment, you'll have pretty much everything that's installed in the global library for you. And requirements.txt. Yeah, and you can see how it's pinned for versions. See the double equal sign and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah. So like those would be the inclusive stuff that you would want to put in that requirements file. Not all of this, but like for yours, it would be beautiful soup, that 4.10.0. And you probably wouldn't even need to pin that particular version just because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, beautiful soup, I'm sure, will work in any version. So,
yeah, just you wouldn't want the before the 4 version because that stuff doesn't work anymore. Just an FYI. So if you install beautiful soup and not BS4, it will not work right. Because I think that's the old Python 2 package.
And just because we've been talking about it all this time, Beautiful Soup is a HTML and XML parser. It's just an easy way to get data out of HTML and XML. It's a library for people who may not be following what Beautiful Soup is.
Right. It's a library that helps simplify setting up HTML requests. So you can then do scraping and stuff like that with other libraries like JSON, LXML, and stuff like that. So instead of having to actually use the requests library to set up your request, you can actually set it all up in Beautiful Soup, and it allows you to simplify handling of the actual request and response data without a bunch of extra code, basically. That's why it's beautiful.
Well, interestingly, you were getting a bunch of warnings about this script that I am
you
not.
might not see it yet. So go ahead and close out of VSCode. I know this is counterintuitive and it's feeling like it's a problem, but and to just reopen it. I think that's basically it. Since you just loaded the extension, it might not actually fire off the IntelliSense and everything.
I'm back in.
Okay. So make sure you can go down to view and show your problems, and you should see the same list I see.
View and show problems. Come on. View problems. No problems have been detected.
And you have the WFD curses file open?
Yes, I do.
Well, Shazam, you're all set. Go away. We don't even need to talk. This code is perfect.
I know it's far from perfect, so maybe it's another
let's
library.
Go in the terminal and let's just type in Pylint on that. Do a Pylint.
Okay.
Go into your terminal there and just do Pylint, and then type your file name WFD curses.
Curses.py. All right, got it.
Yeah.
Oh, Pylint not installed.
Oh, so let's go ahead and do a quick install on that. Just you can do an apt install, or you can do or you can just do a pip.
Oh, stop it. Stupid. Okay, so sudo apt install Python 3 Pylint. Nope, that's not what it did do. It said install Pylint, and then it didn't let me do it. Sudo apt install Pylint. There we go.
Yeah, it might not be prefaced with Python 3. Oh, it actually is.
Okay, I got it installed now. So now I just do Pylint wfd curses.py. Oh, yeah, look at all those errors. Look at all that crap.
So in theory, your VS Code should be showing the same number and virtually the same number of errors. And you can see at the very bottom, it gives your code rating and stuff like that, which is, whatever. It's
bad.
Really
5.5 out of 10.
It's, it just means doesn't conform to the standards perfectly. So the things we take from Pylint and stuff like that are just recommendations. And you just kind of can look at some, because almost all of them are like the similar errors or similar issues. If you just kind of even just scrolling from the very bottom of the list, you can see that you have imports kind of scattered in the file where they should really be just nested at the top. just so anybody doing code review later can understand where the import is actually coming from. And I've seen a lot of things that if you don't hit a certain function or a certain, whatever, function's fine. You can call it whatever you want, method, what have you. Sometimes you won't do an import until that method's actually called. I've seen that. It's, I'm sure it has its uses, what have you, so it's not into the main program. But I
think that would be from a resources perspective. If you don't have to load a library unless something actually happens, then don't. You know what I mean? But
yeah. And in general, I've only seen that in places where you're actually where that function is actually, or that method is being called or utilized is actually within another microservice. So in theory, it is there in that microservice. It's just that the rest of the app doesn't care about it. It's only because that particular reference point in the app is being called via a different way.
Right.
If that makes any sense whatsoever. If you get into doing AWS lambdas and stuff like that, where you can actually isolate functions out there to run certain tasks, it can actually be deeply embedded in your code. And it makes sense to do it at that point because it doesn't matter. But in general, imports go at the top. Shebangs don't really have to be there anymore. I haven't seen one in a file in a long time. Although you can do it. It doesn't matter. It's kind of a force of habit. I haven't created a file. The last time I used a shebang was in Python or in Perl. So, but yeah, you can kind of see that, like, okay, lots of those, it's the same error, right? The standard import is not in the right place. The problem with the names. Oh, if you put a variable down at the root of the file, so it becomes kind of global, with air quotes, global value. It thinks it's a constant because of the way modern Python apps are written. They're, most of the stuff is nested in a class now. So you build your app around a class, and then you init that class, and then you can do all these little variables like, your true and false statements, your poll time and stuff like that would all be nested in the object of the class, and you would now find that via self.pollTime and self.hamdbon and stuff like that. But that's just stylistically how stuff is generally written nowadays. I'm still not familiar with it myself. I had to look at a lot of examples to kind of get the feel for doing that. Again, that's just it's a stylistic thing. It's it looks cleaner once you understand that it's not horrible, which that's what I thought when I first looked at it. It's like, oh God, why did they do this? Python is just supposed to put the code in and you hit go and it runs. I mean, that's literally how, that's the point of Python and Perl, right? You use it so you can just write some pretty quick code that works every time, and you don't have to worry about it. Automate the boring stuff with Python. One of the greatest books on Python, right? Let me automate all the simple tasks with these simple files. But like when you do applications, you should just take little consideration of, things like that. Whereas like style is important, and coming back in and looking at stuff is kind of cool. And then it does tend to make things a little cleaner. You got easy cleanup to, dump your entire app out instead of just kind of trying to figure out where stuff is happening. Some of the stuff you have in here, like, I don't think it complains about it, but you could probably have some of these in your INI file, like these lists of modes and bands. So if you were to push this out as a compiled application, it would actually read that stuff in, and you can actually make changes without actually having to recompile the application, because you can send out compiled Python code, which is cool, using like py to exe and stuff like that. So you can put a lot of these lists and stuff like that inside of an app config file, or just like you have that INI file, and you can
the INI file is like all that was all my construct. None of that stuff was in it originally. It was all in the application. And I was actually thinking of pushing out all those lists into a SQLite database.
And that's another way to do it. If you send out a pre-built little DB, you could just put it in the database, and you'd have those as tables.
Yeah, I
or,
think that makes
whatever.
more sense to me than sticking them in the INI file. I like to keep
The only problem with
configuration
that
for
is that the end user can't edit it easy.
well, not easily, but you shouldn't. This is data that's essentially static data anyway, so they shouldn't have to worry about it.
True. Until your contest logger now runs multiple contests, because then you'd probably have multiple configurations, maybe.
Yeah, but maybe a table with a structure for each different contest or something. I mean,
No, that's quite possible. Yeah.
yeah.
Oops. I can hear my phone through my interface. I love this thing. You can hear the zzz, 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 zzz. And okay, so here's you can actually debug this. So let's talk about debugging. I'm not going to pick on the PyLance and PyLint and stuff like that anymore.
I still can't see that inside of my VSCode. I can't see all those errors inside of.
I don't know why it doesn't show up. Mine definitely does.
Yeah, I saw that from your screenshot that you can see those errors.
Yeah, it's basically all the PyLint stuff too. Maybe it's because, let me just make sure.
I checked to see if I had PyLance installed, and I definitely do. So,
PyLance, I'm wondering if it's because we installed the linter afterwards, because it should. Let's see if it needs lint. Select linter. Maybe because it wasn't there before, it didn't find it. So go up to the command palette, Control-Shift-P, Python.
Because I'm on a Mac and everything, I can't do these keystrokes. So
damn Mac. It's even worse than Windows. It's a Mac.
Control-Shift-P.
Yeah, or just do View command palette. Always works too. That's the
okay. I got it. Control-Shift-P actually is one of the ones that is working. So.
Oh, okay. So you can do Python and select linter. So type in Python, and then you should be able to scroll down and select your linter.
Select linter. Got it. And
then pick PyLint, because you just installed that.
PyLint. Selected. Oh, and look, I've got bunches of errors now.
Okay, there we go. So we solved the problem. So we now have the linter running, and that's exactly the same output that you're going to see from the linter. Is that. So
it's funny that you had 99. I should have picked up on that earlier. 99 problems, but a linter ain't one. Or
that's what I thought. It was funny. Yeah, because it said 99 on my list. I was like, oh yeah, we got to bring that up. It's 99 problems, but the coder ain't one. Okay, this is all pretty good code. So I like it a lot. But we'll show you some fun stuff now if you're ready to move on.
I'm curious about my poll time thing. That was something I threw in. It fixes the problem that I was having for sure, and it probably would fix the problem with any kind of slow rig interface.
Yeah.
But do you, off the top of your head, can you see a better way to do that? Because I couldn't think of one.
I'd have to think about that. Because your main loop kind of does a lot of stuff. It kind of hurts my head.
That don't look at me. I wrote very little of the main loop part.
No, I can understand. Yeah, like yeah. Some of the stuff you probably, if you would do cleanup and refactoring, you'd pull most of anything that is coming from the input side of thing. You'd probably set up like an events class that would handling any kind of event, so it changed from something else outside, and then you would have a refresh class that takes care of refreshing the screen after an event has been handled, and so on and so forth. So you would clean up the main looping class or whatever your main loop, so it's a little more followable reader wise. But yeah, I don't know specifically. I see you got some time sleeps in there.
Yeah, that I didn't put in there. I don't know what that is. The only part of the main loop was the poll time interval to keep the main loop from checking the radio every time it looped, because if the rig interface is a little bit slow, it will disconnect, because the default condition for the radio check is if anything goes wrong with the connection, disconnect it. So yeah.
I mean, that'd probably be fine, because like generally you have most of the polling that you set up with like an FL rig and stuff like that generally handles your poll times anyway. So normally your shim interface should have that kind of polling structure already built in, so you don't have to hit the rig completely. So like even with hamlib, I think there's a way to set up your polling interval so that you have like a 500 millisecond like interval, so it doesn't constantly try to poll to get the frequency. So if you go and look at hamlib directly, it shouldn't just be streaming and spewing information. It should look like it's checking.
Yeah, and I've been digging into hamlib because I think you're delayed again.
Oh no.
Well, maybe not, or I'm just talking over you. But I was actually digging into hamlib because the code does or has the ability to change frequencies and bands and power and all that kind of stuff. But the code that you send into the hamlib socket doesn't actually change the power on my IC7100. But according to the hamlib code, I looked at the IC7100.c file because that's written in C or C++, probably C++. That code is in there. So it looks like it should, but it doesn't. It does on my other radio, my Kenwood. It changes the power just fine. So,
that's interesting. That might just be something specific with that version of the build. Are you running the one built in for WSJTX? Because that's always the newer build. Or are you running the one out of the repo?
I'm pretty sure it's calling hamlib from rig control, and rig control would be from the distro.
Oh, so if you do which, it'll probably be in like user bin or whatever.
Yes.
WSJTX comes with the latest version. So you might want to try hooking into that, but it's called like rig control 4. I don't know how they separate it, but it's shipped with its own hamlib because the repo one is so pathetically old.
Okay, I'll definitely take a look into that and see if that fixes it, because I'd be interested
or
to
uninstall
see.
it and compile your own,
Right.
Which
I did clone the repo, so building hamlib and putting in that version of rig control would be simple, so I might do that as well.
Or like Mike suggests, just use FL Rig like a big boy.
FL Rig, what a piece of crap software that thing is. I'm not a fan.
I know, it's funny though. So let's look at the debug stuff here, because this is kind of the cool thing, and this will also show you one of the first failures, I guess, that you'll see. Over on the left hand side, you have the run and debug, and the first time you click it, it'll probably say select a debug configuration, and you'll just select Python file, just straight simple.
Yep.
And it's going to try running it. And I have brakes on mine, so hold on. Oh, yeah.
I have an exception already, and it's because it can't draw the box, I think.
Oh, so yeah, we find our first issue.
I did notice that anytime my terminal resized, it would crash.
Yeah. So like with any Curses application, there is a way to see what size the terminal is to begin with, and it needs to ensure that it's already there. So you'd have to have like a try catch, so the user would know that, hey, something's wrong here, because otherwise they just get this error message, right? A big crash boom bang at the end that says Curses error, wmove returned error, and a bunch of stack trace right before that. So here's a trick how to debug this and this. So make your terminal window in the bottom bigger. So just kind of scroll it up a little bit, give it like, what you remember is the size of the screen. It needs 40
80 by 24 is the right screen. So
give it like 24 lines, and then go ahead and hit run and debug again. And in theory, if you gave it enough room, all of a sudden you should see your window screen.
Oh, you're talking about inside of VSCode?
Inside of VSCode, yeah. So go ahead and scroll that little middle line up.
Yep, hang on. Does it tell me how big it is? Well, who knows?
Just take a guess.
Yeah, I took a guess. Okay, so let's see. Now I got to start it again. So run and debug. Yep. Oh, yep, there it is. It opened. Okay. So it should be running. So at the top you have a pause, a restart, step into, step out of, and a stop button and all the other good stuff.
So if you go down into your loop that you know you're looping in, that while one construct down there, and you should be able to put a breakpoint. So pick a spot on the left of, let's say, like line 2109 or something like that, the refresh. You should be able to
get down to 2109.
Yeah.
Okay, yep.
So you should be able to go over on the left there and just click it, and you'll have a red dot sitting there. And probably within the time of your timer, it'll stop on that line.
Okay.
So did it stop?
How do I know if it stopped?
It should have a yellow caret pointing at the line, and the line should be highlighted.
Yes.
And at the top, you should have all your buttons are lit up at the top, because now you can step into code and everything else. So you can see that, right?
Okay, there we go. Yes, I did. I pushed the right place now.
Okay. So over on the left now, so this is like the cool part about debugging the app while it's live, is that over on the left, you should see your variables, and you should see locals, and you should see a little globals thing. And if you if you open up globals, it's just a little tree menu. You should be able to see all your.
There's a lot of globals.
You should be able to see everything that's in global storage right now. So these would be everything that's available to this loop in context is available there. And then everything that's specifically within the loop is in the locals context.
Yep, I see it.
So this is kind of a cool thing. I'm going to show you another cool thing.
Okay.
So
I'm interested in all these cool things.
So right below this box is the one that's called watch. Do you see the one that's called watch, and it has like a little plus symbol?
Yep.
If you kind of hover over that box, you see that plus symbol.
Uh-huh.
So you can actually add something in there. So go ahead and hit that plus button, and let's just type one of your variables. Let's say we wanted to know the band. So I'm going to type in band and press enter. So this is now one of my watched variables, and you should see band and 40 come up, because I think that's the default one.
Right.
So if you hit the continue button at the very top and your controls there, so it goes through your loop, it'll just come right back to refresh or wherever you're stopped at. I think you're at refresh like I am. And it'll show that watch context always will be saved in there. If we were to move, well, actually it's going to be in here no matter what. If we were inside of another function, so let's kind of go up and go into, let's put a stop point somewhere that we know it looks at. So you said it goes into the rig, right? And
poll rig. Yeah.
So let's find that. Control F, poll rig, right? Radio. So let's go into poll radio, which in theory should not have the band, maybe? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if it has that. So I'm just going to put a stop right there where it does that if statement, that if rig online, because I don't have a rig online, and it's just not going to find it. So I'm putting a stop there, and I'm going to hit play or continue until it ends up in there, which it should end up in there, in 5 seconds?
Right.
Let's see if it's going to get there. I think it's because my rig's not, I don't have the rig. It's not going to go in there.
No, it won't go in there because rig online has to be not false.
How about I go to check radio for mine? So you should probably have stopped.
Well, there's no radio on this either because I'm doing it from a different computer. So.
Okay. So I'm going to put it into that check radio because that is ran every time. So I'm going to, line 475 is rig online equals true. I'm just going to put a stop point there, and I'm just going to hit the continue button, and then it's going to stop in there. And you should see that too, right?
Yep. I see it.
And yes, you can mock, put a dummy up there, of course, if you wanted to. The rig control D tech M1, which is the dummy interface control, if you wanted to play with it as if there was a real radio. But we're just trying to do an example here. So inside this check radio function, you can see the fact that we also have access to all the globals in there as well. It might not need it, but the thing is you can edit it. You can edit that context inside of your check radio, which it doesn't need to be there. That's just one of those weird things, right? What you complained about very first is the global space is pretty crazy, right?
Right.
So anyway, I was just showing you this. So you can debug your application fully, including, digging into these little things. So you can do a step into from that point, watch it do its try failure. And, and just keep hitting continue, and you can watch it go through the code, and you can see every line that it hits in order. And then if you want it to stop on a certain line, you can stop on a certain line and inspect what happens at that point, especially if you're trying to figure out something's happening and you're not catching an error. Because I notice a lot of these spots here, the try catches are pretty generic. They're just, a straight catch or a straight accept, and it doesn't actually catch the error type and stuff like that. It doesn't give you the error message unless you want it on the console, and it just spews it out. But yeah, so that's debugging. So is that kind of cool?
That's really cool. I'm going to try using that actually on the other machine under Linux and make sure that the linter and everything is installed so I can see what this code looks like over there with it actually connected to a rig and everything. That'd be really cool.
So have you gotten your money's worth yet?
I think so. I mean, I definitely have a lot to explore with this.
Yeah. So this does, and that's the whole point. I mean, I don't really want to dig too much further into this because I know we're running into football time here, and I mean, we're kind of showing the light here of what you can do inside of this, and it does make it a hell of a lot easier to code around, even though it's super easy to code in Python and a text editor because Python and languages like that are so simple. They're very, linguistic, what do they call it? Language based. So they do exactly what you expect them to do when you tell them to do exactly what they're supposed to do. If you say A plus B equals C, sure enough, A plus B will equal C. It's that simple. Of course, you would do it opposite, C equals A plus B. But anyway, I digress. It does it pretty much exactly what you want, and almost all code will generally do what's expected. Even when you get to really complex code, like some of the stuff in here is, you can do it in a way in which it's quite easy to get it to run. These extra tools allow you to kind of do the cleanups and stuff like that people opening with these kind of editors are doing lints on the code. We'll see. And again, it helps you, just run, make clean code and gives you hints and styles. Cause I haven't messed with Python in forever until about 6 months ago when I changed teams. Cause I was doing all C# and TypeScript and JavaScript and SQL. And then I went to Python and I'm like, oh my God, I thought I knew Python until I installed an editor. And I'm like, oh, there's all these rules now. And my first module I wrote, was horrible looking compared to what everybody else was writing. And so I took it some time, looked at how exactly they were, setting up classes and all this other stuff, and I was like, okay, now this makes sense. You can do typing inside of your def statements, your method calls, whatever. So if you wanted it to only accept a string or, assume that what you're putting in as your variable is a string, you can actually say that this is a string and it returns some type, especially if you're sending back a class or a list or something like that, or a formed list based on a class or a data class or something like that. You can be very descriptive now on how things are going into these functions or methods, whatever you call them, and what comes out of them. So the application, especially when you're debugging, it gives you a lot of hinting at what is expected to be there. It's like, oh yeah, this is a list of objects that are radio configs, so you could actually see that while you're debugging, so you could hover over it and say, oh yeah, this is the radio config. And it already knows that a radio config has a name and, whatever version number of its own and blah, 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 blah. So it allows you to do lots of stuff like that. That's kind of cool and neat and all fun and Python-y. But yeah, I'm still learning myself. But these are the tools I've already got installed and have been using with some success. There's a couple other cool things inside of the debugger I just want to mention since we're into debugging. So if you look at the debugger, if you stopped it on the left-hand side, it has that run and debug button. Every run and debug has a configuration file that can be edited. It seems kind of counterintuitive somewhat. So if you go and just hit So let's see. I'm just going to do it again because I made mine go away. If you do add configuration file, you should see a hyperlink for it underneath your run and debug button, and then it'll have you select what type of file you're doing, and you just select Python again. Should give you a launch.json file for it.
You lost me a little bit, I think.
Okay, so in your run debug.
Yep.
Are you out of that? Did you hit stop yet?
I am out of it, yes.
Okay. So now you have the big button that says run in debug in blue or whatever color it is. And underneath that has some text, and one of them's a hyperlink that says launch file, launch config or something like that.
Yes.
Run config or something. So yeah, click that hyperlink and select Python. And then it'll give you a launch.json file, which is the configuration file for your debug session. So in here, you can actually add additional configuration parameters for custom stuff. So for me, inside of here, I have my AWS user key and client secret and stuff like that. So when my application tries to talk to AWS, it knows that the environment that it's being ran in, has its own set of keys and stuff like that to get in. So it can actually debug against live AWS stuff. But for just general stuff for your tooling, you wouldn't need this. But if you were to ever need to set a specific environment variable, you can actually do that here inside the configuration, as well as do numerous stuff. There's actually a link in there for it, and you can Google and Stack Overflow a bunch of information on that launch.json file, and you can set it up to do whatever you want. It's it's pretty powerful, and I'm only using just environment variables, and I'm thinking this is the greatest thing ever. So that's kind of like VS Code in a light nutshell. Using it with WSL in this case, but this will work just the same. Probably not without some of the hiccups that we had, with the Windows WSL configuration directly in Linux or directly in Mac as well. Should run just as fine. So if you're a Python coder and haven't used VS Code, or maybe you're using something else, I tried PyCharm. I just couldn't get with it, only because I'd been using VS Code for C# and stuff like that for so long now. Going to PyCharm just it wasn't a fit for me. I didn't have the workflow down. But since you don't have that issue, you don't have to worry about that, and you can go straight into VS Code and give it a try. And I find I use VS Code for just about everything now, especially as you're reviewing some downloads off of GitHub, and you're just kind of looking at the code like we do on the show a lot. I'll use VS Code and go in there, and we'll throw in all the debug tools I need to actually look at this application that they're downloading off a source and stuff like that. So yeah, it's kind of a cool, handy toolbox thing. And yeah, it's probably as fat as Emacs or fatter. I know.
But again, with fatness comes functionality, right? So
yeah, I think there's a lot of value to it. And like I say, I use it every day at work. So I mean, I've kind of totally bought in, and that's just the way it is now. So yeah, if you ever have any questions on VS Code, and if I don't know it, I'll be happy to learn with you what you need to know, because I love finding all these tips and tricks too that help save me time in my day doing stuff. But yeah, that's all I have to go over. Do you have any questions maybe that you want to review?
No, I don't think I have anything. I think I just need to explore VS Code a little bit more, actually get on to the machine where I've been doing the coding, and kind of do some comparison shopping between the code that I wrote and what the linter thinks is good code, and see how VS Code can help me be a better Python programmer, I guess.
Yeah, again, those things are just, a lot of those are just style guidelines. So it's doesn't make you a bad coder. So, I have lots of production products that have those kind of warnings all over it. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. It won't come back to kill you, but it's always nice to kind of clean that list off as kind of the to-do list. The to-do list is to take care of all the linter problems.
All right, fair enough. I think that's good enough for now. Hopefully that didn't take longer than it really needed to. I guess I should check real quick and see if we had any feedback. So I'll do that if you want to like entertain the folks in the chat room, or just tell people who the folks in the chat room were while I see if there's any feedback.
Yeah, so we did have some people show up here to the chat room today, even though we started about a half hour early, not too much earlier than what we've been planning. We have, let's see, let me go pull up the list here. We have John, K1BTZ, Mike, K6GTE, Ted, WA0EIR, Tony, K4XSS, The Menace, Darren, VK6EK, and Steve, KA7HVT. So, and if you guys have any questions, you can go and put them in the chat. I know, Mike was following along and got his to get set up too, because he was probably playing around with it as well. And once we got PyLinter installed and you set the linter up, you can see all the linting errors inside it. And those are the other linters too in that list that you can install. I always do PyLint. So don't make it your work list, but those are always, like I say, the to-do items that kind of put on the end. It's like, I want to work on this. I don't want to add any new features today. I don't have a bug to work on, but maybe I can do a little refactoring and cleaning. And those are the things you can do, is like, okay, look at all the styling errors and stuff like that. What can I clean up here? How can I handle these variables better? And maybe control what has access to what variable, and does it need to have access to it in this method? And you can look at stuff like that. Look at doing the class stuff. That's kind of an interesting way to set up things. It reminds me very much of setting up a C# class. So it wasn't totally foreign to me, but I didn't know how to do it right away, and I didn't get it right away either. So it did eventually come to me. I started making sense. It's like, oh, okay, this is okay. I get the init class in there and the init method, and I get that all set up and blah, 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 pass self into all the methods. And then all I have to do is instantiate it outside, and, it builds itself based on the init class. And yeah, there's some cool stuff you can do for setting it up class-based. It's not necessary, but it does kind of make sense when you get it all working.
All right, cool. I do have a couple of bits of feedback here that we can do.
Cool.
So let me get to them. Okay, the first one is a press release that the ARDC put out that I got from Dan, KB6NU. So let me start reading this and see how much of it is actually worth reading. But this comes from the ARRL Foundation to Create Club Grants Program. And this came out on January 15th. The ARRL has long recognized that it is in the best interest of amateur radio to encourage and support amateur radio clubs. Clubs historically have recruited, licensed... that text is small. Getting old sucks, people. Don't do it. Let's see. So where was I? Recruiting. The word recruiting. Now I've resized. I can't find the word. Clubs, recruited, licensed, and trained new amateur radios and have provided the community setting for radio amateurs to continue their education and training. The new ARRL Foundation Club Grants Program, funded by a grant from the ARDC, will make $500,000 available to clubs, enabling them to more easily provide and expand those important services. The program will provide up to $25,000 for worthy club projects, while requests for more than that will be referred back to the ARDC. Beginning in April 2022, amateur radio clubs will be able to apply for these grants by filling out a simple form on the ARRL website. The ARRL Foundation will then evaluate the grant proposals, with a key criterion being how the project will advance amateur radio in the grantees' community. In most cases, this process should take no longer than 90 days. There's more here. How much of this do I want to read? I guess I'll read a little bit more. Dr. David Woolweaver, ARRL Foundation President, is understandably quite enthusiastic about this program. He notes, quote, "This program will substantially contribute to the growth of amateur radio clubs in their efforts to expand and support the amateur radio community," unquote. And Rosie Schechter, ARDC Executive Director, is equally enthusiastic. She notes that the program will streamline the process for getting club projects funded so that clubs can get started on those projects more quickly. She says, quote, "We're very excited about working with the ARRL Foundation on this program. We can't wait to see what kinds of creative things clubs will do with these grants." So there you go. Look for that starting in April. And thanks, Dan, for sending that on. And
that's cool.
Yeah, we have a club. We might want to think about it.
Yeah, they got a grant for that 300-foot tower at your house, right?
Well, hey, you know what? I'm all about it, especially if I can hire a tower climber with the money too. So, all right, we got one more, and this was a comment on episode number 447 of the show from Whiskey 6 Echo Lima, and he says, "Good to hear you folks trying out WF View some more. Yes, I've been playing with it quite a bit lately, actually. Definitely check out the latest code from our master branch. The server code in particular is much improved. For Windows users, there are weekly beta builds available on our downloads page." 7.3 from Whiskey 6 Echo Lima. And I believe that's Elliot Liggett, who is the primary author of WF View. So thanks, Elliot. And yes, have been enjoying. And actually, I posted a couple of bugs and feature requests over on their forums, and they got one of the bugs fixed, which is the sizing issue for rigs that don't have a waterfall. And they're actually going to look at doing FFTs and audio-based waterfall display for those rigs that don't have a pan adapter. So there you go.
That would be the bomb.
It would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, you know what? I think that's it.
Sweet.
Cool. So thanks, everybody, for listening. We already got down through the folks who are here with us live, which was actually a pretty sizable bunch for a Sunday afternoon. So thanks, everybody, for being here. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate everybody who's contributing to the show, whether it's just sending us feedback or sending us a little bit of cash so we can keep the lights on here. We really do appreciate all of that, and we hope you have a great week until the next episode comes out. And we'll talk to you all again then. So, for now, this has been episode number 451 of Linux in the Ham Shack. And for the On Assignment Cheryl, W5MOO, I'm Russ, K5TUX.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD73.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Linux in the Ham Shack. LHS is a community-sponsored podcast. Our website is located at lhspodcast.info. You can support the podcast by visiting the LHS Patreon page at patreon.com/LHS Podcast, or by using the contribute list on the homepage. We have a presence on Discord, Facebook, IRC, Twitter, and YouTube. You can also drop us an email at info@lhspodcast.info, or leave us a voicemail at 1-909-LHS Show. That's 1-909-547-7469. Visit the online LHS merchandise store at shop.lhspodcast.info for fun and fashionable show-themed merchandise. Until next time, remember to always heed your hedonism.